This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click the link, the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. Please note, any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat box. For those seeking business license assistance, we strongly encourage the processing of license and permits online. Business license can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org, or you can call 312-74-GO-BIZ. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I will post the mentioned information in the chat. We would like to encourage all of our attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box to send your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please note that the views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are solely those of the presenter and does not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection or the City of Chicago. Today's webinar is entitled Breaking Barriers and Building an Action-Led Movement. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Kenya, our Chief Small Business Officer, for us to begin.
Good morning, and thank you, Stella, for that wonderful introduction and overview. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today for our special webinar related to Women's History Month, and also Happy St. Patrick's Day. We are delighted and excited to have Rohini Day joining us for our special webinar series. Rohini is a powerhouse in hospitality, not only here in Chicago, but across the nation. She is a leading restaurateur and an avid supporter of women. So we're super excited that she's joining us today for our special Women's History Month webinar. She created and developed Vermilion. If you have not been to her restaurant, you are definitely missing out. An award-winning Indian Latin concept restaurant here in Chicago. So make sure you get a reservation and you check it out. In 2020, Rohini founded Let's Talk Women, a collaboration of over 600 women restaurateurs in 13 cities. And she's not stopping there. She's not only looking to support women in hospitality, but women across multiple sectors. And she's supporting all of these women to either start or grow or even scale their business, but most importantly, to do it collectively and together. And so let's give a virtual round of applause as Rohini is joining us today for our Women's History webinar. Thank you so much, Rohini, for joining us today. We're so pleased and delighted to have you.
Such a pleasure, Kenya. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right in. I know people are super excited to hear from you, to learn about your journey. So over the course of today's webinar, I'll just pose some questions and we'll look to you to respond. But to our attendees, if you have questions for Rohini that you'd like for us to pose during the Q&A, make sure that you put those in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. So let's kick it off. Rohini, in your own words, provide our attendees an overview of your career.
That's a tough one, Kenya, off the bat. I am the queen of career change. Grew up in India, did my master's and in economics over there, and always knew that I wanted to work at the World Bank. That was my burning, zealous mission ever since I was 13 years old. Came to the US, did a PhD in economics, and did work at the World Bank. Not a linear path. I was not taken in, kept banging doors, wouldn't take no for an answer. Did that. Then I worked with McKinsey and Company, which is management consulting. Learned so much. Those are skills I use till today enormously. And while at McKinsey, I've always enjoyed food, you know. While at McKinsey, I was on the road and all I knew about food was eating out at amazing restaurants and how to expense that. And then something clicked and I realized this is 18 years ago. I just felt that Indian cuisine in the US was misrepresented to the core. It was that stuck genre of curry in a hurry, spicy, gooey, mush, no ambiance. And I, in my infinite humility, set out to change that and jumped into the world of restaurants. And that was the birth of Vermilion, 2003. And then after that came along the way women's advocacy, but I'll stop there.
That's awesome. I love how you have this dream of working essentially in corporate, and you had opportunity to do that, but it was this passion and this drive to change the way that Indian cuisine was presented here in Chicago that drove you to start your business. And I've had the opportunity of dining in and at one of your events and having your food, and I will say that it is absolutely amazing, and we are so lucky to have you here in Chicago. And so it's interesting that you didn't always want to work in hospitality. So talk to us a little bit more about how you got there. So you talked to us about how you worked at the World Bank, you did some time at McKinsey, but talk a little bit more about how you shifted into this industry.
My parents are still horrified. This is not a blue-blooded career after a PhD and World Bank, McKinsey. I think they had higher aspirations for me, but they've come around now after 18 years. Nonetheless, think 20 years ago. This is when Nobu was transforming the perception of Japanese fare long time ago. Now it's ubiquitous. It's in 7-Elevens, but then it was not approachable, fun, easy, hip, understood. And that is what really drew me to the notion of opening my Vermilion in Chicago 18 years ago. And I also had Vermilion in New York on Park Avenue, 14,000 square feet for a decade.
Oh, wow.
But more than just Indian, I love the fact that I'm just being open here, is that we meld Indian and Latin American. And that was a niche I wanted to explore for a couple of reasons, Kenya. Not just to dispel the myth of Indian and play up the bold, amazing flavors that both subcontinents have to offer. And there's a lot of geographical and historical commonalities across the cuisine. But I also wanted to completely deviate from the whole Eurocentric model of fine dining. Everything considered fine dining was steeped in either Italian or French, and the rest of the globe was lumped into the box of ethnic. And that just made me irate. Fine dining does not begin and end at French cuisine. Let me just be very categorical. There are other cultures that have had thousands of years of very fine dining. So that's what I wanted to explore. And that's why the melding between Indian and Latin American. And to give you an idea, it's dishes like the lobster Portuguese, because the Portuguese have been in India for 400 years and in Brazil, or the tandoori skirt steak, because I'm just a big red meat lover, and seared in the Indian oven, but it's a classic Argentinian cut of meat, So those are dishes that we play with, apart from just very hardcore Indian dishes that you can't find elsewhere. And it's fun.
That's awesome. And I will say that, the meal that I had was very delightful and very fun, and also amazing to the palate. And so there's something that you brought up around the perception of food that is outside of French cuisine, that there was essentially these two buckets, right? Like either you were ethnic or you were Eurocentric.
Correct.
And so as you entered the hospitality industry, being a woman of color, can you talk to us about some of the perceptions and biases that you faced, and most importantly, how you overcame those?
So I'm very fortunate because of my background. I'm very financially literate. I'm savvy. I've worked with corporate CEOs. I've worked at the country policy level. I do not lack confidence. And so I wish I could, were there tiny little things where people would mistake me for the hostess as opposed to the owner and ask to speak to my owner, or, call me honey or sweetie, and I would put them in place right away. But tiny little things like that, but no overt discrimination. Did I have to go to maybe 5 times more the investors to raise my capital, or maybe 3 times more the banks? Maybe. On the other hand, maybe it's because it's restaurants, which is a very high failure industry and very difficult to raise external capital for. That being said, Kenya, I think you raised the fundamental question, which is why we are having this 1 month a year dedicated to our gender, which is half of society. That's another thing that makes me irate, but hey, let's celebrate. I just believe that when it comes to entrepreneurship, power comes from ownership and power comes from scale. And to get there, it's not that women lack the entrepreneurship gene. If you look at the SBA statistics, 40% of enterprises started in the US are by women. They're women owned. There's no dearth of the gene of, or the desire to open businesses. But 2% of the VC dollars and 14% of all conventional loans. So what that means is women lack 2 things to really, really push their empathy or to change their map in this industry. One is financial literacy and the ability to ask for money. And I think that is very important. We have to get out of the bubble of just raising money from our savings or friends and family. That won't cut it, because it's the same amount of labor, but 4 times the rewards if you raise external capital. So I'm very, very hell-bent on that. I've actually, even before I started Let's Talk Women a year and a half ago, I started the program with the James Beard Foundation on women's leadership. I started that in 2011 and ran and chaired that for a decade. And the entire focus was on external financing, financial literacy, and confidence for women.
And I will say that, Rohini, the opportunity that I had to meet you in person, you exude this amazing confidence, just simply by the way that you hold a room. And I think that's so incredibly important for our women entrepreneurs to know who you are and to value your voice and know that your voice is just as important as anyone else that's in the room.
Can I pause? Because that's also something very close to my heart. This is not something that I was born with. Please know that. It's a muscle. Yeah. It's a muscle. And all of us can cultivate and practice it. Practice 3 mini asks every day.
I like that. So talk a little bit about that, because I know that we all, sometimes we have imposter syndrome.
Yes.
We walk into a room and we feel like maybe I don't belong or I don't have the same credentials. Yeah. So how do you practice that?
It doesn't matter the level of perceived success or whatever. All of us feel that we don't deserve our space. But you have to project confidence. You have to develop the ability to, I'm going to say it, BS. You have to, because I think it's a societal flaw. Women are brought up to be nice. Mm-hmm. And we as parents can change the map within a generation if we raise our daughters to be fearless and fierce and forget about being nice.
Yeah.
I'm not saying be obnoxious.
Sure.
Stop going around trying to pander to and please and be palatable and likable. That is not going to get you far. Be direct, be fair, but ask for credit, ask for responsibility, ask for promotions, ask for that raise, ask for your due, raise your idea, ask, that it's all about developing that muscle. And I just feel there's so many resources out there, and that's half the battle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. So, there's this saying fake it till you make it. And in a lot of ways, that's, how you went to a room, that you have dreams and you have aspirations very similar to you having a dream and aspiration of working in the World Bank, and you ended up doing that. So being able to walk in the confidence and knowing who you are and being able to understand that your voice is important, again, as any other voice that's in the room. So thank you for that. And I think that's something that women in leadership, no matter where you are, that they still struggle with that a little bit, is owning your voice and owning your confidence. And so talk to us a little bit about, some of the other patterns that you've noticed over the years about women at work and things that we could be doing better to advance our careers or our entrepreneurial journey.
I wish I could. That's a massive issue you raise, and it's a big one, especially for the US. I actually think we are really backward when it comes to the rest of the developed world. And I can rattle off all the statistics, but you see them around you. I mentioned the loan dollars. If you look at C-suite and boards relative to other developed countries, that too. If you look at childcare benefits, we're the only developed country to not have it for parents. I'm not just talking about for women.
Yeah.
As a mandated benefit. So this is a propagation tax, I call it, or a motherhood penalty, whichever one you want to call it. And that's the reason why we are ranked 40th in the world. Actually, now it's 30th by the Women's Economic Forum for parity, the lowest of all developed countries. So when I talk about confidence, that's a very important piece of the puzzle. So is financing, but there is only so much women can do to lean in. I would be naive if I did not mention that two other very important parts of the puzzle, which is why I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you, with BACP and the city of Chicago, because two very important pieces of the puzzle is policy, at the federal, state, city, county level, which impacts us entrepreneurs, and our working environment. That could be the industry, or it could be your corporation. What policies do they have? How supportive are they of women? And I'm not just talking about DEI. DEI is wonderful, and we're all gushing about it now. But unless tapping into women is a top 3 strategic imperative for corporations or for cities, you're missing a massive opportunity. Not just to triple your, creativity, to be a beacon for talent, beacon for retention, amp up scale massively. This is so much untapped potential because it's all being channeled to the same sources of power who've held on to power for 230 years since we've been a republic. For God's sakes, 230 years and no woman president till now. It is not for lack of talent or candidates.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. And I guess some of that was also posed in a recent report by McKinsey, where they studied and they found that women are often hired and promoted based on past accomplishments, while men may be hired and promoted based on future potential. And so you have these policies and these systems, to your point, that have been put in place for centuries. And so what are some ways that we can start to change that dynamic? You touched on it a little bit in terms of policy shifts, whether it's at the local level or the federal level. What are some other ideas that you have around shifting that dynamic?
For women and in society as a whole, across corporate policy, politics, entrepreneurship. Oh my God.
Can you solve that problem, Rohini, please?
In 30 seconds or less? Yeah, I think no amount of Me Too and marches is going to cut it. We can march till the cows come home, but progress has been glacial. Yeah. So I think it all comes down to you're getting me off on a tangent philosophically, but it all comes down to campaign finance reform. That is the root of evil in US democracy. All our politicians are focused purely on raising money and elections and re-elections. And because they're beholden to special interest groups, nothing will change until that's changed. When that changes, if and when, I don't know if that's going to happen the way we are politically divided today, we have to get our act together for policy change. We have to make sure, why is it 14%? Why can we not, with a bunch of tax incentives and the right collateral structure, make it 40% or 50% of the funding to women entrepreneurs? See what productivity you unleash then, right? Because we all know that it's such a massive share of our GDP, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So that's the day that I'm waiting for, and I'm open to making that policy change happen. So you want to join hands with me? I'm your volunteer.
I love it. I love it. So let's pivot a little bit and talk more about your entrepreneurial journey. It's been a long, successful one. And so we see your successes, and you've done amazing. You've been able to have, these successful businesses, but you've been also able to reach back and help other entrepreneurs and women along their journey. I think a lot of the lessons that we learn come from mistakes or challenges that we've had along the way. What were some of those mistakes that you've had along the way that you've managed to learn from?
This could fill up the rest of the panel. I don't know how to prioritize my mistakes. I think my timing has always been horrible. So when I launched Vermilion, I was pregnant.
Oh,
and
wow.
I had planned the opening such that it would be a month before I was due to give birth, but my baby came early, and she came 2 weeks before the opening, and all hell broke loose. And when I launched Vermilion New York, the opening was the day that Lehman Brothers went belly up and the 2008 financial crisis struck. So this was 14,000 square feet on Park Avenue. I've learned so much. I'm still learning so much every day, whether it is how to keep a positive and optimistic face for your teams in the midst of being mired in debt, the last 2 years of the pandemic, being on the edge of the precipice, or wondering every day, do I still want to do this? Should I continue? Or how do I combat this? Fighting it, reaching out. I think the best thing that I've learned is how to ask for help. And that was the birth of Let's Talk Women, which I know we'll come to, but I am not ashamed or shy. And what's the worst that can happen? A no.
Mm-hmm.
But to not ask would mean you are not going to get it anyway, right? So I think that's
right.
what I've learned.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I can appreciate that. And Rohini, I think that there are so many entrepreneurs and just women in general across many industries, and even those that work in corporate, they look up to you as an inspiration. Who has been an inspiration for you? What leaders have you looked up to along your journey?
I'll go back to my policy wonk development economist roots. I've always admired women who are, there's no doubt, whether it was Christine Lagarde when she led the IMF, or whether it's Ursula von der Leyen who leads the EU, or whether it is Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton. She is the closest who came to the seat of power, the only nominee, right? I am an unabashed fan. Or Mary Barra, GM. I tremendously admire. I know how hard it is for all of them to get a seat at the table. I know they have to prove themselves 4 times more than men because of the statistics, right?
Yeah.
And I really can't wait for the day when it's 50-50 and we don't have to work triply as hard to
Yes.
validate our seat.
I love that. I love that. And I love that there are all women like that have the ability to shift policy, not only nationally, but globally that you mentioned, that you look up to. And actually women that aren't in hospitality, but like these women that are absolutely amazing, leading policy and leading efforts that can shift and change our nation as well as the world. So thank you for sharing that. So for our attendees, like when you're looking for people to look up to, or maybe to even model your journey after, it doesn't necessarily have to be within the same sector or the same arena. There are women and people that are doing amazing work outside of the area that you're working in.
Kenya, before you go to the next question, who are the women you admire? I want to know.
So yeah, this question is, I've gotten this question before, and my answer still remains the same. My grandmother. And so I tell this story of my grandmother, a woman who migrated from the South with very little education, who raised 7 amazing children, who leaves a legacy of hundreds of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who have done way more than she could possibly imagine and have exceeded professionally beyond her wildest dreams. But when you talk about confidence and a woman owning her voice, even though she had very little education, you would never be able to tell it the way that she showed up in rooms and the way that she presented herself as a woman. And so for me, she's always been my inspiration. And of course, there are women that do amazing things across the world in different areas, but she's always my number one. So thank you for asking that question.
Amazing. On that note, I believe, I could be a little off, but I believe 40% of mothers in the US are single moms, right? And so my salute to all of them.
Yeah. It's challenging, right? Like being, I don't want to use profanity on our webinar, but being a bad A, coming into the workplace, doing an amazing job, and then going home and taking care of home. I think women are absolutely amazing.
It's amazing. Single parenthood, single motherhood. And it is also amazing because coming back to, this is with minimal policy and government support when it comes to anything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes. We salute all of our attendees as well as Rohini, for all of the women that are doing amazing work out there, as well as taking care of home and your children. We salute you and all of the great work that you're doing. So Rohini, all of this great work, all of these amazing events, advocacy, how do you unplug? Like, what do you do to take a step back and to kind of recenter yourself?
I am a hardcore introvert.
No way. Get out of here.
I'm happiest when I'm by myself on my couch with maybe just my husband and my daughters and us. I dread going out. But can I fake it? Absolutely, with aplomb. Okay. So my therapy for myself, Kenya, is twofold. I go running in the morning, love to run outdoors, must do. That's just for myself. And my other one is my rum and coke in the evening. That's a must.
I love it.
That's what I do.
I love how you bookend your day. You start with all of the things that we should be doing, right? Like being good to our bodies and exercising. And then after a long day, a nice rum and coke, just to kind of like.
You can't reward yourself. What's the point, right?
That's right. You work so hard. And it's great that you mentioned that. Like we work so hard. And I think a lot of times for women, we self-sacrifice. And we don't make the time or prioritize ourselves to put back into ourselves. And so in order to be great, like you can't pour from an empty cup, Like that's another saying that I've heard. And so even to have those small moments of either exercising in the day or that rum and coke, for me, it may be a lemon drop at happy hour after work. But having those small moments where you can just do something for yourself. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Rohini. And so before we open it up to questions, what advice do you have for women that are looking to grow their own business, or advice that you have for women that are looking to excel in their careers?
You keep giving me these big lofty questions.
Because you're so amazing, like you've done everything. You have great advice.
But I would love to share with you, Kenya, a little bit about how even as one person or a small entrepreneur or one entity, you can have a massive footprint. And for that, I'm going to share this example of Let's Talk Women. May I?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in the thick of the pandemic, had no idea how to reopen. July of 2020. We didn't even have toilet paper and hand sanitizer, no testing, no vaccinations in the horizon. I reached out to 15 of my women colleagues, restaurateurs in Chicago, on how are you opening, how are you coping, and how are you even handling this whole pandemic? And we started helping each other's businesses hugely, tangibly. And this is all about women owners boosting each other, which I fostered methodically. And now our group of 15 in Chicago 2 years ago is now 50 plus of us in Chicago. And I've scaled this to 13 cities. So it's in 13 cities in the US and 600 of us women entrepreneurs. What do we do for each other? There's, of course, the basis of the camaraderie, just internal mentorship by sharing learning models, resources, referrals. It could be something very tiny as who's your HVAC guy, because I've been frauded by HVAC for 20 years. Or it could be staffing or sourcing. What's your vendor? Give me your prices. Can I do better? Introduce me to someone else. Negotiations. Also, we started doing enormous economic collaborations together with each other to cross-promote each other. So now instead of accessing just Vermilion's customers and followers on our socials and newsletters, now I access the customers and followers of all 50 of my Let's Talk Women. And similarly, we've started cross-collaborating across cities. We host summits, we write op-eds together, we've met with the governor, we've met with city councils, we're getting into fundamentals of shaping our own destiny. And so that is an example I only want to share because I believe it's applicable to any sector. It's applicable across sectors. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can use that model. It is also very relevant to you and your careers within corporations. Don't just wait for DEI to change your path. Go find 10 other women, cohorts, share your concerns. How can you 10 boost each other? Because 10 voices is so much more powerful than one. And that's been our magic. So I'll stop there.
That's great. And so, Rohini, you guys have been doing amazing events, not only in Chicago, but across the nation. What are some upcoming events where we can support?
So we just had our 12 March 8th, massive Let's Talk and Celebrate events across the country. I'm just getting a breather right now. And our summit. So I think the most valuable thing will be find all 50 of us. Go to letstalkwomen.com, go to the Chicago page, see the 50 of us and champion us. Whether it is your trainings in your corporations or whether it's your galas, or whether it is your summits and forums, like you've involved me here, Kenya, imagine a group of Let's Talk Women talking to you about how we can inspire each other and support and boost each other. This is a unique model of competitors collaborating to make the size of the pie bigger. So yes, involve us in all of that. Come to our businesses and as the founder, I have to give our socials a plug. You know the universe today, despite the fact that I despise social media. It is at Let's Talk Women. Women is with an X. We are open to all women owners in food and drink in Chicago, whether it's a farm, bakery, cafe, restaurant, spice store, whatever. So no dues, completely no bureaucracy. We're all peers. Come and join us.
Awesome. And I hope everyone can see the slide really quickly on the screen. I hope so. And so again, we encourage you to check out Rohini's website. It's here for you, www.letstalkwomen.com, and make sure you follow them on social as well. So she is also on Instagram to get all of the latest updates about what not only is happening here in Chicago, but in all of these amazing other cities that are listed here. So if you have friends that live in these other cities, make sure that you share. This is not just something that she does for Women's History Month, for the month of March. This is happening all the time. So if you're looking to be a part of this amazing group, you can find out information there, but also to support those events. I will say I went to one, and I can't remember how many chefs were presented that day, Rohini, but every single course was amazing. I left like on cloud 9, because if you feed me and it's a good meal, like that has like totally made my day. And so you partner with amazing women in Chicago.
It's not only the fact that it's just, Kenya, we are each other's women restaurateur group, because if you look at Chicago, it is unfortunate, but all the mega restaurant groups are male-owned. Whether it's the Boca group, Let Us Entertain You, One Off. I mean, I can rattle off 20. Can you name one massive woman-owned restaurant group in Chicago? None.
None.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love for us, together with the city of Chicago, this is my outreach to you, to change that.
For sure.
Right? Together. And we are each other's restaurant group. We help each other, we boost each other, we promote each other, and we want the city, and we invite the city to come and join us on that journey.
Yeah, and we are such supporters and fans of you, and we look forward to partnering and collaborating. You've done a lot of the legwork and pulling people together. And I think one of the reasons why it's so successful is that you're so authentic and passionate about helping people, Rohini. And we're super thrilled and very grateful that you took time out of your day to join us. We couldn't have had a better speaker for our Women's History Month webinar. I know that you're incredibly busy. And so again, we thank you and applaud you for all of the great work. Virtual applause for Rohini. Guys, make sure that you follow her on Instagram and that you check out her website. And now we'll open it up for questions for a few minutes, if you're okay with that, Rohini.
Love to. And before, I would be remiss to say any conversation is made purely by the moderator. So Kenya, you've been so warm, so supportive, love the tone of our interaction. And I think that's exuding the whole positivity and warmth of this. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have to take this offline in a couple of weeks and have like coffee or dinner and continue the conversation. So maybe you guys will catch me and Rohini out eating somewhere. And we're just continuing today's conversation. So now we'll pivot to questions. I hope that you guys, again, if you have questions for Rohini, please make sure that you are putting them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will post them. We have a few more minutes before we wrap it up. And so our first question, Rohini, is from Dina. Dina, thank you so much for joining us. And to all of the attendees, thank you guys for joining us for today's conversation. And her question is, you mentioned that there were tiny things that you experienced, but they didn't wear on you over time. So how do you think we make global changes in these microaggressions towards women? And I think you touched on this a little bit particularly, with it being rooted in policy and systems changes?
I think it is very important to aggressively involve men in the dialogue for change. To have women's conversations and forums with just women is preaching to the choir, and it's vacuous and useless because we all know what we need. But as long as the seats of corridors and the seats of economic power rest with men, and there are a lot of good men out there. There are a lot of good men out there. It would behoove us to make them our allies and champions. In fact, we just held a summit called Let's Talk Change, where I had 3 iconic men from our industry: Jose Andres from World Central Kitchen, Danny Meyer, founder of Shake Shack and Union Square Hospitality Group, and Andrew Zimmern, huge celebrity chef, speak about what are the things that men can do for change. And I will quote Danny Meyer, where he said, "You are either an active friend of women or you're an active foe. There is no in between."
No in between, no complacency.
Don't plead ignorance, don't plead apathy, because if you're in that camp, you are a foe, you're an enemy to advancement. I just love that. And I think that's relevant across all sectors, everywhere. And Andrew Zimmern said, I'm born into a rigged system as a white male. I know that.
Yeah.
And the only way we can unrig it is together. And it all has to be through lobbying and policy change. And I'm willing to be in that fight with you. So I think we just have to get back to policy change with all the men.
I love that. I love that. We have to bring them along the way. And I love that statement, either you're for or you're against. There's no in between, and being complacent with just saying, I'm not picking, I'm not choosing. You have to stand up and be an advocate. So I thank you so much for sharing that, Rohini. The next question, I think I'll make it a little bit more broad, is around capital. And so finding resources for capital, whether it's grants or it's loans, or I think earlier you talked about, women not necessarily using like their own money and extending themselves, but what are ways that they can explore other opportunities to access capital?
I have some ideas, but why don't you share, Kenya? Because you know these resources, and I think that will be valuable to our attendees.
Yeah, so I will share just around some grants that the city of Chicago has for small business owners, particularly in areas that the city is focusing on reinvesting. So there's a grants program that we just launched in partnership with the Department of Planning and Development called the Chicago Recovery Grant Program. And I'll make sure to put that in the chat, or if one of my team members from BACP that's on the call, if you guys can put a link to the Chicago Recovery Grant Community Development Program, that would be amazing. But essentially it provides funding to small business owners that are doing great work to drive catalytic change in their neighborhoods. So you can ask for a grant up to $250,000, or even for projects in excess of $250,000. And so more information on that website that hopefully my team will put in the chat. And then there's also other funding that's available if you already have an existing brick and mortar called the Small Business Improvement Fund. And that fund also provides up to $250,000 for businesses that are looking to make structural changes to their building or capital improvements to their facilities. And so a good place to learn more about all of these grants is to make sure that you guys are following us on our social media platforms. So you can check us out at Chicago BACP, and we list all of the grant opportunities that the city has for small business owners. So thank you for that, Rohini. The next question is about restaurant groups. So someone talked about Paramount Group being one of the groups. And they asked, like, what are your thoughts around getting a restaurant group started?
So I'm not saying there aren't any. In fact, Let's Talk Women is in 13 cities. And let me just explain the way I've structured it is every city has 2 to 4 co-hosts. We don't call them leaders because there's no bureaucracy. We're all peers. It's flat. And 3-4 of our co-hosts across cities, whether it's Rita Michelle in Lexington has 7 restaurants, Ellen Yin in Philly has 5, Kim Bartman in Minneapolis has 9. Rarity. I really had to like scrounge to find them. I think there is so much we could do together. We could imagine a space maybe by the city of Chicago or jointly with us, with Let's Talk Women restaurants, veterans, as well as startups. So we get to learn from each other, and the city comes and they support women there, and we have a burst of women's forums there. And every month we could have forums around finance and funding and equity and other issues around, boosting women. It could be well beyond the month of March. That's a theme of mine. So I do think I love the loans you mentioned, Kenya. And grants. I'm going to check it out myself. I spend almost 1/7 of my time these days scouring through various sites. It's your newsletter. It's the state of Illinois newsletter. It is the Illinois Restaurant Association newsletter. It is all my women's networks, because I belong to the Chicago Network, International Women's Forum. I look through Hello Alice. So I'm looking through all of these, looking for small business grants, women's grants, entrepreneurship grants, restaurant grants. And I will apply for 7 to get 1, but it's worth it.
It's worth it. It's well worth it. Yeah, thank you for that. And someone actually had a question about the title of your program, Let's Talk Women. What does the X stand for in women?
That is my Ph.D. econometrics, mathematics bias. X in algebra is the unknown. It's the unknown variable. So X for me means that Let's Talk Women is open to any woman owner of any size, stripe, color, race, format, cuisine, any orientation, identity, whatever. As long as you consider yourself as a woman and you're an owner in food and drink, Let's Talk Women welcomes you. That's what the X stands for.
I love the inclusivity, and I love the way that you have it branded as a part of all of your marketing materials. That way people know that this is an inclusive organization and an inclusive group of women. So thank you for your foresight and being able to do that. So someone asked about cohort management. Have you experienced a situation where a cohort member didn't play so nice? And how did you deal with that?
I think we're confusing what I call stop asking women to play nice with being a nasty team member.
Yes.
Those are very different things. Mm-hmm. When I said stop asking women to play nice, what I meant was don't be obnoxious, but stop focusing on being nice. Start being a little more direct in your ask and practice that repeatedly, and do not be diffident about that or apologetic in any way. Get your due and keep asking for it. It is not a bad thing at all. That's what I meant by stop playing nice. Now, if someone on your team is not playing nice as a team member, then it's the onus is on the team to bring it up with that person and just be very upfront. Sometimes we misunderstand each other, and sometimes a little bit of flagging can go a long way. And if it still doesn't, then you have to reevaluate who belongs and who doesn't, right?
And I think that's a great response, right? Like, if there are people that are not playing nice, that are part of your larger team, having that conversation around, does it make sense for that person to continue to be a part of the team? And what ends up ultimately happening to the larger organization because someone isn't being a good team member. So earlier in our conversation, which I absolutely loved and is a great takeaway for our attendees, was around confidence and showing up in spaces and showing up in rooms. And one of the things that you mentioned was practicing 3 mini asks a day and just making that a part of your habit to help build your confidence and to build your voice as well. Someone wanted you to provide a few examples about how they can do that.
You can make a list of everyone on your wish list you want to be either your mentor, ally, or get help from, and set up conversations. Just reach out, make sure it happens, and then go to them, but go with a concrete ask. Don't just go and say, hey, can you help me? Because that leads to nowhere. Give them 3 options, one with a heavy lift, one with a medium, and one with a light. What's the worst? Even if they say no to you to all of those, they'll remember that you approached them. There will be a little bit of guilt, and that's not a bad thing if they say no, or they'll open their doors and help you. And imagine if you approached, it takes work. It's systematic. Make that list. If you were to do this every day, 3 little asks, one could be mentorship. It could be at home. I don't know what your home situation is, but are you being supported evenly by your children, by your husband? If not, you've got to ask. Or it could be for that funding we spoke about. Go to banks, go to the city of Chicago, go to counselors here and there, and set up that time to get advice and counsel, and who knows what you're going to learn, right? It could be asking for a better position at work, whether it's by way of more responsibility or a more fulfilling job or more recognition or better compensation. These are all conversations you have to initiate because power is never given.
Yes. I love that. I love it. And I think so many times for women, we silence that inner voice. And it goes back to you with the way that sometimes we were trained or even raised. And it is to always be nice and in some ways to put yourself second. And so I think the tips that you gave in terms of getting outside of yourself, knowing that you have acts and that you have needs or that you have wants, and having the confidence with what are 3 things that I can ask for today that maybe, I haven't asked for before, but what are ways that I can now start to do that as a part of my daily life? And then you start to build your voice and you start to build that confidence. And to your point, if the answer is no, it's no if you didn't ask anyway.
Right.
So why not go ahead and make the ask? That is wonderful advice, Rohini. I love that. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yes, do it. All of us make lists, long lists of everyone you're gonna hit up with asks and just work through it. I wish we could really train all our daughters. It's gotta, if we start early, I strongly believe within a generation we'd be having a very different conversation.
Agreed. Well, if we all start today with ourselves, and to your point, our daughters, and build their confidence, and then of course, it just becomes this cycle of women just being confident and totally owning themselves and owning their voice. And Rohini, we thank you so much for joining us and for all of the amazing work that you're doing in Chicago, and for being an inspiration to women and men alike here in the city. Any final parting words before we close today's amazing webinar?
I want to thank you, Kenya. I do believe this is just the beginning of our journey together. I know we can make miracles happen when we put, amazing minds together and collaboration. That's about it. And I loved our conversation. It veered into the philosophical and into well beyond entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, these are all important issues. And I strongly believe each one of us can make a massive difference. So I hope all our women are fired up and we all go out and make change happen. I
am totally fired up today. And guys, this is recorded, so make sure that you play it back on YouTube. A lot of good tips from Rohini, and make sure that you check out her website and her Instagram and follow her. This woman is amazing, and all of the great work that she's doing is changing the world and changing the way that the hospitality industry is run here in Chicago and across the world. So thank you again. We appreciate you. Thank you to all of our attendees, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a wonderful day.
That's the Let's Talk salute.
I love it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.